Welcome, everyone. Give me 1 minute. Trying to get us onto Instagram. All right. Looks like we're here. Okay. Welcome to Notable Approvals. I am attorney Amanda Schaefer. I'm very, very excited to talk about our case today. Before I get to it, quick reminder, don't forget to like us and follow us Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever you are watching. If you find this video to be helpful, please click that share button, that save button, and drop us a comment. Let us know what you like. And our contact information is scrolling across the bottom of your screen and my screen if you do need a lawyer. So today's case, it's actually more than a 4-year journey, as the title of today's video says. The 4 years was just the VAWA, but this case started way before that. So this is a client resident of Brooklyn, New York. She is a native and citizen of Grenada, is actually her and her son. She, excuse me, entered the US in 2014 with a B2 visitor visa and never left. Ooh, excuse me today. Got a little something in my throat. She met her US citizen spouse in 2015 in Atlantic City. He lived in Philly at the time. She lived in Brooklyn. They were both there with some friends. He went up to her. They then went out for drinks, exchanged numbers, and they started switching off, going back and forth to see each other every other week or so. After a few months, they started extending their stay with one another. And when they decided that they were going to get married, he agreed that he would move to Brooklyn, where she lived with her teenage son. They got married in 2016, and this was their first marriage, for both of them. They got married at a church back up over in Philly, and then had a party in New York. So a little bit for both sides. And they officially moved in together after the marriage. And he would go back to Philly once a week to see his daughter, but wouldn't stay overnight. His daughter lived with the mother. But about a year after getting married, he did start staying overnight in Philly when he would go visit his daughter. In November of 2017, they got their first interview notice for their marriage interview with USCIS. And the interview is going to be in December. At the end of November, he went to Philly to go see his daughter, but then when he didn't come back, she just was calling him. He doesn't answer the phone. She finally she doesn't have anyone else's number. She had only met, I think, one member of his family once, and didn't have any friend's number. But a couple of days later, one of his friends calls and says he was arrested. He said he doesn't know why, but she should come to Philly. So she did. And she finds out that he was arrested for possession of a controlled substance. That was the first time she found out he did any drugs. And she also found out he was likely not to get bail because he was on probation for other offenses that he committed. She then spoke to his probation officer and found out that he had been arrested 32 times. And this is her husband. She was in absolute shock. She had no idea about any of his criminal history. And his bail was denied because he was a flight risk. And that meant he would miss the marriage interview with USCIS. So she went herself and she told them, and this is a legitimate reason to ask for a postponement, if anyone's wondering, if your spouse is incarcerated at the time of your marriage interview, you still have to go and tell them, and they will reschedule it. So that's what she did, and they did reschedule it. After that, she went back to Philly for his new bail hearing to see if he would get out. And she was never allowed to speak with him this entire time when he was detained. So she goes back up there, and they added some conditions on him being released. And then she also found out that he was being released because he was about to have a baby on the way. He had a baby on the way. He was about to have a baby. And again, shocked and confused because she knew she was not pregnant. When he finally was released, he called her. And then when she was like, so who's pregnant? He said, oh, I lied to the judge to get out of jail. She didn't believe him, but she said, All right, she was mad. She told him she was mad about his criminal history, that he lied about it, and she said, especially, look, I have a teenage son, and you live with him. I don't want any of that near him. But she said, look, you're my husband. Let's try to work this out. Come back home, and let's see what we could do. So he came back to Brooklyn, and they tried to work things out. He apologized, the whole deal. However, the next month, he started going back to Philly more often. And when she would question him, he would get mad and they would get into an argument. Then they started getting into arguments about money. He didn't work. He refused to get a job, so she was forced to pay all the bills. That's when the name calling started. He started calling her names, started threatening her, saying, I'm going to get you and your son deported. I'm going to tell immigration we had a fake marriage. Kind of the verbal abuse that we typically see in situations like this when the abuse begins. And she was really afraid to tell anyone about what was going on, and she didn't for a while. And then, unfortunately, not too long after, the verbal abuse turned physical. One night, when she said to him, "Look, I can we talk?" He said no, and he pushed her really hard into the closet. She got a huge bump on her head. She got a cut on her leg. She had to, she was worried her son would see it and didn't want her son to see it. Um, and then, of course, he then apologizes. I'm so sorry. The whole cycle of abuse was going on here. She also found out that some of his arrests were for, including gun possession and attempted murder, which is obviously terrifying to know someone you're married to was charged with that. I don't know what happened with the charge. Don't know if she does, but she obviously couldn't trust him at this point to tell him the truth about it. She actually sent her son to stay with her her son's father's sister, who lived in Brooklyn as well, for a little bit of time because she was not okay, and she didn't want her son to see her in that state. So this physical abuse unfortunately continued. One day he thought she was standing too close to him, so he elbows her in the face, causing her to bleed from her nose and her mouth. And in May 2018, that's when this got to its worst point. He went through her phone, and this is a red flag if someone goes through your phone without your permission, even if it's your spouse. Everyone has privacy rights, but nobody should have anything to hide, but your spouse shouldn't be going through your phone looking for things. And that's what he did. He saw she was talking to males, just conversations like her friends. And he got mad, grabbed her by the throat, pinned her down. She couldn't breathe. Luckily, he released her. We actually had pictures of it for immigration with the marks on her neck. But again, she didn't call the police. She was too scared. But she did finally open up to some friends. She only told them about the verbal abuse, not the physical. But at least she did that because they said to her, go get some help. August 2018, she gets the Stokes interview notice. That's when they separate you and they question you both, because the first interview did not go well at all. Did he go with her? Oh, I'm sorry. It wasn't the second interview notice. It was the rescheduled interview. They never had the first one yet. Right. So they go together to the USCIS interview, and he just did not, he was just rude. And she said he lied that he didn't know answers to questions that he knew the answers to. And this is another thing that it can make it really hard for people who filed a marriage case, and then, something happens in the marriage and the spouse, out of vengeance, just gets answers wrong at the interview or claims the marriage is fake when it's not. And I have a case right now I'm dealing with where I'm trying to file a motion to reopen a really complicated case. And in this case, let me put my do not disturb sign on so I don't get interrupted in the stream. In this situation, it was like so this person in this new case had actually said to the officer it was fake. a fake marriage when it wasn't, and it makes it really hard when you now go back even to do a VAWA application. But that's the thing, it's part of the abuse. They're doing this because they want to keep you in a subordinate position. So no decision had been made. And after that interview, he left the marital home and he refused to return any of her calls. September 2018, she gets the Stokes interview notice. So she calls him and he says he'll only come if she pays him. And she's like, I'm not paying you. You're my husband. Shouldn't have to pay you. And that is when they kind of ended things. And that's when she came to us. And I actually remember going. I went with her to the Stokes interview and we told her, look, her husband's not coming. We're filing for VAWA. He's done some very horrible things to her. And I always tell clients going into this, whenever I've gone to a lot of interviews with clients in this similar situation where their spouse had filed a marriage petition for them. By the time the interview comes along, they've been the victim of abuse. We're going to switch it to a VAWA, but you still have to show up. You cannot show up for the interview, but that looks bad. You want to go and tell them, like, look, this is what's happening. You want to tell them because it shows you're not hiding anything, but at the same time, it also can help you keep your green card application from being denied and having to refile and repay the filing fee. In addition, when I went with her, this was during our prior president, and our prior president had different enforcement priorities. And at the time, like before that, with Obama, there was never really any when you filed, someone who was filing for VAWA or someone who had their green card application denied when their marriage fell apart, unless they had criminal history, they weren't automatically placed in removal proceedings. But under Trump, that was happening. So we wanted to make sure she didn't get placed into removal proceedings as well. So we went there and I told her, I'm like, look, I've gone to these, and sometimes they give you 30 days to submit the VAWA. And you're not submitting it to the Brooklyn field office. You're submitting it to the Vermont Service Center, who adjudicates the VAWA petitions. And then you have to send the receipt notice to the Brooklyn field office all within 30 days. If that's the time limit. Sometimes they give you 60 days. Sometimes it's open-ended. They say, okay, just give us a copy of the notice when you get it. And they don't deny it. Honestly, why? It depends on the office. It depends on the officer. It's about luck. This client has been on the wrong end of luck, unfortunately. She's a very nice woman. I've known her for a very long time now, since her case began, 6 years now. And 5 years. I wasn't her attorney with the husband. But we went to this interview. We told them, they said, okay, we're going to give you 30 days. And that's gave us a notice. I said that. And they said specifically, we know that meant we had to file the VAWA, which is, these VAWA filings are big. They're like this thick. And if you can't see, it's like probably a thumb thick, at least an inch, maybe 2 inches even. We put a lot of effort into explaining things and what happened in the marriage. So we knew we had to get it filed fast. But it can take 2, 3, 4 weeks sometimes to get a receipt notice. So they said to us, if you don't have the receipt notice within 30 days, give us a copy of the application and come to the office and hand in a request for an extension so that the I-485 isn't denied and she's not put in removal proceedings. So I did just that. I actually physically went to the office and handed it in, and there's nobody. I can't give it to her exact officer. You have to give it to whoever is standing at the desk. They don't have receipts to give you or anything. They stamp it or whatever. But, basically we were just under the impression that we'd get the extension because they told us, we know you might need one. And we were going to get it filed and get them a receipt notice as soon as possible. And we were waiting for the notice to tell us when the extension was due. Well, even though I did that and followed their directions, they did not grant an extension. I honestly don't even know what happened with it. They never said anything. They just denied the case and immediately put her in removal proceedings. Now, today, with the current administration, they are not doing that, and this probably would not have happened. And it may have just been my client was just incredibly unlucky, because she was out of status, but that was her only immigration violation. She had no criminal history. There was nothing else there. And normally, especially when they know you're filing for VAWA, they don't deny it. Now, it was frustrating because that meant she had to pay again for her and her son to file for the green card. But now she also had to deal with removal proceedings, and she had to deal with removal proceedings under an administration that was not dismissing cases. So it was a really stressful time. So we filed the VAWA petition, and we waited. And then COVID hit almost right after that. So the courts were closed. Now, in order for her to get a work permit, we had to do what's called a defensive filing, which means that we had to have it stamped by the court or file it with the immigration court, but the immigration courts were closed. So I tried sending it and it was getting rejected. So we actually ended up filing with USCIS, which was you normally don't do in your removal proceedings to create problems, but it was that or nothing. So we told our client, like, look, this might not work. We can try it because that's our only option. And that's what she wanted to do. So we did. And she has been able to get work permit and travel document since. Not only travel document while in removal proceedings. But in September of 2021, when the new president, the new administration took over and they announced the new enforcement priorities and that they were going to dismiss cases, we filed a prosecutorial discretion request to dismiss or at least close her case while the VAWA remained pending because it had not been approved yet. And DHS agreed, and her case was terminated in May 2022, which we were very happy about because I had other clients who filed for VAWA and had it pending, and they wouldn't dismiss it until it was approved. So again, I don't know. Every case is different. People ask me why. I don't know. I don't work for USCIS. I can only tell you what happened. And I can tell you that every case is different. And that's why when people say, my friend, this happened to my friend, or, this is what my friend, had their case dismissed or didn't have their case dismissed or got their green card. Well, I always say to people, I don't know what your friend's case was or what happened or why, even if it was exactly the same as you say. You can have two identical cases and they can go down completely different paths because welcome to USCIS and EOIR is really the answer to that. So ever since May 2022, we've been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for her VAWA to be approved and her son who's on there as a derivative. They never sent a request for evidence, nothing. We couldn't, 4 years is a long time for a VAWA. I would say they're taking on average 2 years. It's been like that for a while, maybe even 2 to 3 years, but 4 years, that's a long time. So finally, this morning, I got her approval in the mail and her work permit for VAWA beneficiaries. And I actually woke her up this morning calling her at like 7:30 a.m. because I was so excited for her that we finally got approved because she's been very patient. But even so, understandably, she's asked me many times, when am I going to find out? When am I going to find out? I'm like, I don't know. It should be soon. It should every time. I've been telling her, I think for 2 years, it should be this year. It should be this year. It should be in the next few months. But I don't know why it took so long. But what I do know is that it was finally approved and we're so excited for her. She already has her green card application filed. So that means now we are waiting for her either for a green card interview or for her green card to be approved. She'll probably have to submit a new medical exam since it was so long ago. And her son, it's possible they sent the request for evidence kind of recently. If they did, then they're good with that. So congratulations to this client and her son for getting through the most difficult part. It shows the importance of seeking legal assistance immediately if you have a problem in your marriage, especially if you're being abused or your parents being abused or your child's being abused by a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. Because, this client did act pretty quickly. If she had acted even quicker, we may have been able to start the VAWA before that Stokes interview, and have had it filed within the 30 days, and she could have avoided removal proceedings altogether. I actually see this case more as like an anomaly in that very few of our clients that we say we're going to apply for VAWA for get immediately placed in removal proceedings like that, or are given such a only 30 days and then the extension request is denied. That's unfortunately what can happen sometimes with USCIS. It had nothing to do with the client or anything that we did or anything anyone else did. Well, except somebody at USCIS internally. Like I said, she was just a victim of bad luck with the timing of everything, of when this all took place. If it took place 2 years later, or it took place in 2021, same time, like December 2021, she would they weren't putting people like her in removal proceedings. So she had to spend all this extra money to get out of removal proceedings. And as soon as she did, she was so excited because she was able to get a travel document and visit her family back in Grenada, who she hadn't seen for so long, years and years and years. So we were really excited that she was able to do that. And how long will it take to get a green card? Hopefully within the year. I told her this morning, I'm like, so yeah, now we wait for the green card. I think it'll be within the year, but the good news is your VAWA was approved. That's the good news. Let's focus on that. In terms of evidence, we didn't have a lot of marriage evidence. They weren't they weren't married that long. And, this was one of those cases where, the spouse wasn't working. It was very frustrating with the joint finances. But what we did have was a very long, detailed affidavit explaining their entire relationship, everything that happened, everything I've talked about today and more, explaining the evidence, explaining, I think she had a psychiatric evaluation, but she did not have a police report. She did not have a restraining order or anything like that. As I've said before, if you've seen any of my other cases about VAWA, you don't need that. Obviously, it helps if you do, but it's not a requirement, and you can easily get these approved without it if you do well, it's not easy, but I mean, it's not an issue. It won't create a problem, but you do have to address it, and which we did. So I'm very, very excited for this client. And if you're out there watching and some of this sounds familiar to you, you're going through a similar situation like this, my advice is to get help as soon as possible, whether it's just reaching out to a family member or friend, calling a lawyer like me or someone else familiar, going to the police, doing whatever you can. Most important things in these situations is that you get yourself somewhere safe, and then we can deal with whatever we have to do. But you do not have to stay in the marriage if you're being abused. Nobody does, and nobody should. That is really all for today. I'm excited to hopefully soon update this case and tell you that my client got her green card. I don't anticipate any problems, her and her son. Don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever you are watching. If you found this video helpful or know someone who may, go ahead, click that share button and that save button. Drop us a comment. Let us know what you liked. And if you need an attorney for any of your immigration family matters, our contact information is scrolling across the bottom of your screen. We're here to help, and we appreciate you watching, and have a great day. See you next time.